Beyond the northern edge of the Hellenic world, rugged mountains and untamed river valleys were home to many peoples who carved their own place in antiquity. In this episode we talk about the Bryges, a tribe which the Greeks recorded as ancestors to the famed Phrygians of the Asia Minor. The Bryges, or Brygoi as they were known to the ancient Greeks, inhabited areas to the immediate north of the Hellenic mainland. Their core region is believed to be an area around the three lakes, today known as Ohrid, Great Prespa and Little Prespa. In antiquity these lakes were known as Lake Knidos, Great Bryges and Little Bryges. The chief city of the Bryges was called Brygias or Brygion. The Phrygian tribes also reportedly inhabited northern Epirus as well as parts of Illyria, Pelagonia, Macedonia and Mygdonia. The earliest record of the Bryges comes from Telegony, an epic poem attributed to various authors between 8th and 6th century BC. There, the Brygoi appear as the adversaries of the Thesprotians, led by Odysseus. The first historical mention of the Bryges, however, comes from Herodotus, who records them as ancestors of the Phrygians, originally being the neighbors of the Macedonians. As the Macedonians say, these Phrygians were called Bryges as long as they dwelt in Europe, where they were neighbors of the Macedonians. But when they changed their home to Asia, they also changed their name and were called Phrygians. Testimonies from other ancient sources, as well as Phrygian etymology of the Phrygian place names, do suggest a likelihood of shared origins and language of the Bryges and Phrygians. Furthermore, the Phrygian language itself displays significant similarities to the ancient Greek, which was observed by both ancient and modern scholars. Based on this, a hypothesis of a Greco-Phrygian linguistic subgroup is proposed as a common ancestor to both Hellenes and Phrygians. According to this hypothesis, the Bryges would have been among the earliest settlers of the regions north of Greece, before they were largely pushed out by the Illyrians, Thracians, Pausanias, and the Greeks themselves during the Late Bronze and subsequent Dark Ages. This would also explain the scattered Phrygian settlements across Illyria, Macedonia, Epirus, and other neighboring regions. When it comes to the religion, we do not know the exact names of the deities which the Bryges believed in. Much like other peoples in the region, they likely worshipped their versions of the Greek gods, such as Zeus, who was known as Sabazios in Phrygia and Thracia. It is notable that the Phrygians in Asia Minor also worshipped Cybele or Cybele as the mother goddess. It is unknown whether they had brought her worship to Asia or perhaps adopted an otherwise Anatolian deity. Cybele was also worshipped by the other Anatolian peoples, such as the Lydians. Several Phrygian deities included Artemitos or Artemis, Men the moon deity, Bus, and others, most of which had their equivalents in the Hellenic pantheon. In Greek mythology, the very founders of the Phrygian kingdom are said to have come from the royal house of the Bryges. Legendary king Gordias was the founder of the Phrygian capital city of Gordion in central Anatolia. Gordias was said to be the last member of the Phrygian royal house, originating near the region of Macedon. Gordias was succeeded by King Midas, who was either his biological or adopted son. Midas himself also originated from the Bryges according to some versions of the story. Herodotus reports a wild rose garden at the foot of Mount Permion near Macedon. He calls it the Garden of Midas, son of Gordias, where roses grew of themselves, each bearing 60 blossoms and of surpassing fragrance. Although the Bryges were not recorded as taking part in the Trojan War, they are mentioned in the events that followed. The story of the telegony happens chronologically after those of the Iliad and the Odyssey. There, King Odysseus of Ithaca finally returns home after 10 years of post-Trojan adventures. However, he decides to sail once more and goes to Epirus, to the realm of the Thesprotians, who are ruled by Queen Caldice. At this time, Thesprotia bordered the land of the Bryges, who were hostile towards Caldice's kingdom. Odysseus eventually agrees to marry Caldice and stay in Thesprotia, ruling the country as king. However, at some point, a war broke out between the Thesprotians and the Bryges. Odysseus led the Thesprotian army, supported by his patron goddess Athena. However, the Bryges themselves were favored by Ares, the god of war. As the war dragged on, neither side could prevail, until an intervention of yet another god, Apollo. Apollo managed to separate the fellow Olympians, allowing Odysseus to lead his people to victory. The Bryges were defeated, which allowed Odysseus and Caldice to reign over Thesprotia for several more years. Eventually, when Caldice died, Odysseus decided to leave Thesprotia and returned to Ithaca. From this point on, as we approach the semi-historical and historical times, it seems that the Bryges continued to lose control of their lands. They were likely pushed out of much of their former territories by the likes of Epirot and Macedonian Greeks, but also other tribes of the region, such as Illyrians, Paeonians, and Thracians. According to historian Marsyas of Pella, the establishment of the kingdom of Macedon by Caranus during the Greek Dark Ages came at the expense of the local tribes, especially those inhabiting the city of Edessa. Although the Bryges are not explicitly mentioned, etymology of Edessa is believed to be of a Phrygian origin, likely meaning tower in the water. This would place a variant of Phrygians, or more specifically the Bryges, as the original inhabitants of Edessa prior to the establishment of Macedon. In the following centuries, the Macedonians would enlarge their realm, annexing lands that would be later known as Upper and Lower Macedonia. This was done at the expense of the Bryges, but also the Thracians. By the classical times, only the remnants of the Brygian lands survived, scattered among several regions that were once presumably dominated by the Bryges in the past. Their once substantial holdings across Epirus and Illyria were now reduced to a small area around the Bryges lakes. Their chief settlement, Bryges, was now in a buffer zone between Lynkestis and Illyria, an area that often served as a battlefield between Greek and Illyrian tribes. In Illyria itself, Strabo reports that some of the Brygoi lived in an area north of Epidamnus, with their main town being Kydriai. Also, an epitaph erected in Epidamnus itself records a person named Brygos, son of Aphrodisias. Small Brygian pockets in northern Epirus and Macedon west of the Axios River also still existed. To the east, a region of Mygdonia at the foot of Mount Holomon was inhabited by a Brygian tribe called Mygdones. Over time, these Mygdones possibly adopted a rather Thracian character, being surrounded by Thracian tribes for centuries, so much so that they were sometimes referred to as the Thracian Brygoi. During the Greco-Persian Wars, the Bryges resisted the Persian invasion into Europe. In 492 BC, the Persian army was encamping in then subjugated Macedon on its way to invade and capture the rest of Greece. However, during a night, the Thracian Bryges launched a surprise attack, killing many Persians and even wounding its main general, Mardonius. Eventually, the Persians, with their vast army, defeated the Bryges and went back to the Hellespont after securing a crossing point. Eventually, it would be the coalition of the Greek city-states that emerged victorious. By the 4th century BC, the kingdom of Macedon was growing into the dominant power in all of Greece. Under Philip II, the Macedonians annexed all of Lynkestis together with the Bryges Lakes in 358 BC. With Mygdonia also annexed to the Macedonian realm, this likely marked the end of any Phrygian independence. The last mention of the Bryges came in the year 42 BC during the time of Roman civil war. The Bryges were recorded as camp servants in the service of Brutus before the final battle commenced between Octavian and Marcus Antonius on one side and Brutus and Cassius on another. Antony and Octavian ultimately emerged victorious. We will continue with the episodes about the lesser-known peoples and civilizations of antiquity, so make sure to subscribe. This was WanaxTV, and we'll see you again soon.